Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, an inspired conversation space between Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner on the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness.
We keep our conversations honest, our experiences real, and our philosophies exploratory. We believe that in order to raise incredible humans, we first have to raise ourselves. We know that in order to rock the family, you've got to nourish the mother. If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively, head on over to 𝘮𝘢𝘯𝘵.life or 𝘮𝘦𝘦𝘥𝘡.love to go deeper. And for all live-streamed pre-release podcasts and all our free content, head over to our free Facebook group, Nourishing the Mother with Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner. We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we are so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today's podcast is Tapped Out and Touched Out, when you've got nothing left for relationship. So what we hope this is some food for thought, perhaps some gentle nudges for a tender heart and an already full plate and body, but also just some lived wisdom from two women who have certainly walked this path on conscious parenting and attachment parenting journeys of respectively 3 for Bridget and 4 for myself. And yet, not that we're on the other side of that, but some many years down the track, still have a really connected and juiced up relationship, which is unusual, I would say, not only in our culture and society, but certainly with the way that we choose to parent. That relationship, sexuality, connection has still stayed front of mind and pivotal to the experience of parenting rather than at the sacrifice of.
I love the way you've put that, and I also love the way that you so beautifully introduce this topic, because it can be a topic of sensitivity for many women and many relationships when you give so much in your mothering and that you feel sometimes completely slammed by motherhood, that it's almost like, fuck, like my relationship as well, I have to put time there. What do you mean?
Yeah, I totally get it. I can completely feel into that part of me. I really, I know that part of me that was like, I have got no space for you and everything you do is annoying and irritating and I don't need another child. I don't want to look after you. Or at the same time as I'm telling you what to do like your mother, I'm saying I don't want another child. You know, we might talk about that later. But I also can touch into the part of me that genuinely didn't feel worthy of having needs because there were so many needs to meet. I just kept putting mine at the bottom of the rack. But the problem is when you do that, you end up completely depleted and completely unsure of who you are in the world.
And completely, I think, also living on this kind of beige Groundhog Day, kind of like each day rolling into the next with no juice or excitement, because it's just about service, you know, and often with this low level resentment that you often will get thrown at your partner, if not your children, for where you find yourself.
Yeah. Can you touch into the piece of you that felt like that, tapped out and touched out?
Yeah, oh my God, like so much. I mean, I think probably the last few years I've been much more conscious of when I know I get there and when it feels like my husband's needs for intimacy perhaps feel like a burden to me. Like I'm really aware of it. Whereas when my son was a toddler, particularly my first child, I think I just avoided intimacy like the plague because I just had no room or desire for it, because I was so deeply consumed by mothering by trying to figure out my identity. You know, I think I was really just in relationship autopilot, but knowing that I was really just treading water, that it wasn't really where it could be. But I really didn't, I think, have the lens then for understanding what was possible if I did put attention there. But also I think for me and for so many women, right, like you have to open up your own wounding and your own patterns and your own stories that block your intimacy to go there. And at that point, I just wasn't ready. So I can so like put myself back there and go, oh God, I see all the ways that created the relationship, or the, you know, I mean, it was fine, but fine's only good for so long, right? And I didn't want fine anymore, but to not have fine anymore, I had to look at, okay, well, where are all the ways that I am complicit in this fine, like, pattern that I find myself in, which for me, like, looked like being too consumed with the baby or the toddler to have any energy for presence with my husband, or just my body being so for my child that I wasn't even connected with it really, let alone inviting my husband into connection and, you know, desire. Like I wasn't desiring my own body and my own pleasure, let alone trying to want to find that with my husband at that time.
It's so true. Yeah, I feel every piece of your story there as well. Yeah, so true.
And I kind of like, my body kind of like winces at that memory, because I mean, it speaks to my own like development of my own sexuality at the same time for where I found myself then. But like I look back and go, wow, like I didn't know that I could have that and this, you know, that I could have my body be so for my child, but my body also be my own and be really boundaried in such a way that I could move from this experience of mothering with my body to my body being a deep vessel for pleasure for myself and for my husband. I didn't know that could coexist.
Yeah, it was pretty hard to see a living embodiment of that, wasn't it? Pretty hard to know it's possible if you can't see it in the world, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think the world reflects that for us at all. It's like the Madonna or the whore, right? Like it's not. There is no like way to play those, to intertwine them, that they just seem so at odds with each other, right?
Yeah, and I do think as you were telling your story, I was reflecting on those pieces. You know, that's always the beauty of story, isn't it? It's our own experiences. I was like, yeah, man, I feel that. So you had the partner who came towards you for intimacy, and I had the partner who just backed away further. And I think that usually your partner is going to fall into one of those two camps. Either they get needy and it gets repulsive, or they just give you distance because they think that's what you want. And that distance just keeps growing. And the bigger the distance, the more awkward, the harder it is to start to close that gap.
Yeah, because the gap just feels more. There's so much more in between. Like the bigger the gap, the more there is to traverse, and the more terrifying that feels. Because where do I go next? Like, how do I actually
fit in that? Yeah. And I just think about myself in that early stages, certainly of babies 1 and 2, was just so many needs that I think I went on my trauma autopilot, which was always levels of body disconnection. I think back then I would have thought that I was connected, only now I know what connection can be. I recognize that it wasn't. So I can see how I was able to punish my body. So
force it into things, or
exercise beyond what actually was nurturing. Like when we had Chloe on the podcast, remember I said I was running with the double pram, pushing both my kids up hills, you know, like 2 weeks.
Smashing your pelvic floor, right?
Like just smashing my body because I needed to lose this baby weight or something.
Prove something.
Yeah, I needed to lose something in order to be better, you know? So I can see there was that. I could easily be so busy with needs, I wouldn't eat all day. And I think that's something that mums do a lot. I'll eat the crusts left over from my kids' breakfast, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when I'm trying to do the dishes before I run again into dinner. Like, just so disconnected from my body. I wasn't even aware of hunger signals. Like, it's not like I was intentionally ignoring them, though sometimes perhaps. Just so disconnected, didn't realize I hadn't eaten until 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So I can feel into all of those places that just perpetuate the I've got nothing left for anyone because there's not even enough here for me. And the second my partner would come closer, so proximity gets really hard in intimacy because the closer someone gets, even though we think it's about them, it's actually forcing us to shine an internal light on what we have been so busying ourselves with ignoring. Which I think mothers do extraordinarily well, that we can be so busy in motherhood that we use it as a way of not meeting what is actually happening for us internally. Like 100%. If you and I wanted to, we could find a bajillion needs in a day that meant we never rested and stopped. It's not hard to do.
Oh, exactly. I mean, you look at your house, like there's always something to be done. There's always something to be folded, something to be put away, somebody's life to organize, some bill to sort out, some extracurricular activity to like it never ends, right?
Right. And often when we feel like we don't know who we are, we can't have needs, we haven't felt pleasure in a long time, we're not nourished or nourishing in our own body, it's almost like that tolerance gets less. So, oh God, if I could just clean the house, I'd feel better. Oh God, if you just did the blah, 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 it would be better and I would feel better. If you would just, this if and when fallacy.
Everything becomes so conditional. It's like, I can only feel good when.
Yeah.
You are not, and this is classic. Like we know this when we get shitty with our kids and like the mess, like we just feel like if they would just sort out their mess, then like we could be free.
Yeah.
And it's like the same kind of thing that happens in relationships. So if you would just not do that thing or just do this thing for me, then I could be.
Yeah, I wouldn't have to feel those things. But the truth is every dynamic is setting us up to feel the very things that we are required to grow through. You have to go through to grow through, right? You can't climb over it, under it, around it. You've got to go through it. And everyone in your world will orchestrate you towards that truth. Your partner's an intimate relationship most intensely. So, of course, the closer they get to you, it's almost like, I almost see it like a snarling beast, and I'm like watching him approach and it might just start with a low rumble. And he gets a little closer and I'm like, starting to bare my teeth. And then he gets closer again and I'm ready to like gnash at him, right? Like it's just that sense of it's not him, though our psyche will go, oh, it's outside of it, definitely outside of us. And if this, that and them would be better. If our world were perfect, if our pillow were fluffed, if there were no challenges for us, we'd be golden. There's nothing for us to change. We're all good. It's out there.
I love that. It's such a great visual of the way that our brain works, right?
Isn't it? Right. And the construction of the ego, right? Which I also want to say, there's a lot of just stigmatizing the ego. I love the ego because it's the ego in all of us that is.
It's our humanness. We've got to love it.
Yeah. And always seeking to keep us safe. But the question is, can you be safe and uncomfortable? Not only conditionally safe and comfortable. I think the greatest growth will happen when you are safe, and the greatest safety, as I will say over and over for the rest of my life, is when you are connected to your body, because your body will always give you the signals to know where a boundary is, what's safe and what's not safe, but you can be uncomfortable and safe. And that's where growth will be. But our ego will make us believe that only our little, worn out little path, our little territory, that's comfort zone is what's safe. Anything outside of that is pretty scary. So the closer you come to me and the more I feel those things that I've been too busy to feel, or have not felt like I have the capacity to hold myself in feeling, the more, and let's say the less you're able to hold your own capacity for feeling, the more you'll get angry and resentful at your partner for not holding your feelings.
You need to slow that down because it's a really good point. Can you like unpack that a bit? Because that's so helpful, because we can miss so easily the skill and the practice required in holding yourself enough to not make everything them, or to not throw it on them, which is, you know, continually doing that is going to erode the quality of your relationship pretty quickly.
Oh, intensely, right? Because all we want is to be loved as we are, for who we are in any moment, not loved with conditions, only when, only if, you know, all we want, all of us, all of humans, your children, and it's no different to you and I and your partner. We're all children, we're all whole souls, we're all human, we're all after the same thing.
Just all walking each other home. That's how the saying goes, right?
Yeah, we just are craving to be loved for who we are as we are. And I mean, the crazy thing is when you love someone from that place, change spontaneously happens, because now all of that energy that would have been diverted towards attacking you, defending them, now all of a sudden is freed up to actually be self-reflective and go, oh, you know, I want a little more of that or a little less of that. But when we're so busy and consumed with defending ourselves against the reflection that our partner is throwing at us, there's no energy left for changing, and no one's changing when they feel rotten about who you think they are. No one's
all that tends to happen in that is further defense, further, you know, edginess, and like sometimes retaliation, because it's like, you've set me up to feel for this long that I am this monster, or I am this incapable person.
I'm this disappointing to you.
Yeah, that to be the bridge beyond that. I mean, you would know working with clients, Julie, like what that requires of an individual to walk themselves through and not like leave because it feels too hard, right?
Man, I actually think, you know, 90% of the work I do is on how to hold yourself. Like at the end of the day, if I could boil it down to one thing, you know, there's all the fancy language around, we learn new ways of relating. We learn to see our partner in new light. We learn to appreciate rather than fight against, so that we're free to change. You know, we learn to understand how our partner functions and how to work best with that. Sure, all those things. But really, all of that is bullshit unless you can hold yourself and have the emotional intelligence to hold yourself so that what you deliver them is received and digestible. If you can't anchor into yourself and hold yourself without throwing it on them, without vomiting it on them, without, you know, ice queening and cutting them out entirely, distancing and shutting down, or, you know, slicing them into 1,000 pieces, none of those things are going to get you what you want. None of them. They will all erode the love and the structures that you want to build in relationship. So unless you can hold your own emotional intelligence, be connected, which is the fem aspect, be connected to feeling, be connected to your truth, but able to hold yourself in it and deliver what you know your partner has a tolerance or a threshold or an ability at this point in time to hold. Not because they're static, just like pelvises, we all change and move, right? Like, I mean, this is one of the greatest battles in the birth culture, isn't it? Is people going, well, you know, the pelvis is only this big, so if your baby's like this or that, there's no way you can birth naturally. Versus the alternative opinion, which is, it is infinite how the body moves and shifts and changes and opens and is not static and formed. It's the same thing. Because you have this much capacity today, because they have that much tolerance or listening ability or holding ability today in this moment does not define who they are and what's possible.
And what your potential is. I mean, as you're talking, I'm thinking about, like, you know, a very conscious thing that I knew was going to be required of me and my husband was growing our relationship to be able to hold 3 children.
Yeah.
Like, and I talked about this on the podcast, like that was going to be one of my focal points, was what needs to up level in our communication, in my meeting of his needs and him meeting of my needs, and just us prioritizing connection so that I could continue to parent the way that I wanted to have the value on family the way that I wanted to. That all required investment and commitment to growth. If I had have listened to the part of me that says, oh no, he just won't handle it, you know, and my mother said to me that she didn't think their marriage, hers and my dad's marriage, could have handled 3 children, right? So I also had that old like story running.
I remember that being big.
Yeah. And so if I had have listened to that part, would I have had the courage to do what I did and like turn his no to a yes and have an amazing family now? Like, possibly not.
No, but this is it, right? You are able to hold yourself.
Yes.
No.
And challenge the dominant narrative, like, you know, the inflexible pelvis or the static pelvis, to go, no, like, I know there's possibility here. I know there's more capacity here, but I have to be willing to trust in my capacity to hold myself through what's going to feel hard. And it did. It was really hard at times, but it was worth it.
This episode is brought to you by Queen School. 5 weeks to be loved better by becoming a better lover, beginning on Valentine's Day. Let's school you on all things men, women, and intimacy over 5 weeks in a live container with me, where we will go through mask, femme energy, how to communicate, upskilling, how you bring your embodiment to power pack it, how you become a magnetic attraction force for the type of relationship you are seeking, understanding what both you and your partner need, and being able to soften and open up in ways you never thought were possible. Find out more at 𝘮𝘢𝘕tenor.love. And the growth of who you became in that process too. Right?
Yeah.
You've always got to remember, as we're going through this hard stuff, is that this is growing us. And I do think sometimes we look for those lessons as those moments are happening, and it makes them easier, where you go, wow, you know, I mean, you and I talk about benefits and drawbacks all of the time here. It's just another version of that, right? Like, what am I gaining here? Because there is no loss without gain.
Yeah. And also to I remember, like, one time, I think I was like a 1 month postpartum and my husband was really struggling. I think I called you in tears and I was like, this is what's happening. And I was like, but I just really know, like, my mantra has to be right now, like, don't fight reality. Like, I had to hold myself in the reality I was in rather than look for every way to exit it. I had to hold myself in it. So I learned how to be with it. So I learned how to hold myself, hold my vision, build capacity, and it be an opportunity for growth, not, you know, relationship trauma.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. But without the capacity to hold yourself, so which really just means to be able to feel your feelings without crashing, crushing, and collapsing in or out of yourself. To be able to feel the feeling and move it through your body and stay connected to the heartache. Often I think that's the hard part, the yearning, the heartache that is whispering for a different reality. But we want it right now, because the suffering it is to yearn, often we're not willing to be with, and yet it's the most magnetic part of the entire process. Right? Like that yearning, that heartache is the barometer, is your North Star. So
well, I mean, that's also what, I mean, that place is what burns down old ways of being and what's no longer needed, you know. And it's like that it's like the baptism of fire, right? It's like the who I was and how it was and everything before now can be no longer, because I know that this is creating for me something that I haven't reached yet, but that through this process I'm grasping at and I'm going to find. Like, that's kind of what it is. It's like it's a point you have to go to traverse and then come out the other side with something that you know you yearn for. Like, it is like the feeling that carries you. It's a little bit like, if we're using birth analogies, like there's something incredibly transformative about the pain of birth that if you were to not fully feel it, have you fully traversed it and got everything out of it? And it's a little bit like feeling that heart yearn,
yeah,
ache.
Yeah. I mean, ecstasy is that threshold point, isn't it, between pleasure and pain, and there's something ecstatic that awakens in that moment. So it's the same thing here. But I guess to come back to your point, Bridgie, was what I had said was the less you're able to hold, which really just means be with and listen to, like the way you would be with, listen to and hold your child. Because that's what we're all here on this podcast to do, right? We're all here to be child-led, to listen to their experience, to see function in the dysfunction, to go beyond behavior and into what's really going on with a dysregulated nervous system and how to bring it back, right? So if you can't do those things for yourself because you are giving so much out and staying so busy and distracted that either one, you don't want to on some level go to that, or you don't have any resources left to feel like you can because you are so exhausted and depleted from running from that thing, but also in your mask for so long, that you will begin to become, like, my precious. You will begin to like crave it so badly that you'll get angry at your partner and be looking actively for all of the ways that they are not helping you and giving you the thing that you are starving for. But like we always say, you cannot ask the outside world for something that you are unwilling to give yourself first. That is never going to go well.
And this is a really big thing, I think, for women who are wanting to also transform their intimacy sexually and like wanting to move to a place of deeper embodiment, but that are still in that acculturation of, or he needs to do something for me, or he needs to in some way evoke that of me. Yeah.
Prove himself, do the first step, whatever it is.
Because there can be resentment, particularly for women who move in their masculine so much, to then feel like, so I'm also responsible for this. I have to go first with this too. Like it's another thing.
Yeah.
And I really get it.
Yeah. But what if this is for you too?
And what if the process, what if it's not even about the end goal, which might be more connected, sex, a baby, whatever it is? What if it's the process of who you become on that?
Yeah.
On that invitation to be more deeply embodied in listening to what your body wants and creating room for pleasure just because, not for an outcome. Which that, even if you are, if you're super in your masculine, like that will feel frivolous. That will feel like, well, I could be doing something else than doing this.
Yeah.
And even that can be a bit of a fight you have with yourself, right?
No, but I just think we catch it. We we'll hook ourselves so many times that we end up spinning in mud. What I have come to see is how, if you were with a mask being, regardless of gender and genitals, if you're with a mask being and they have a level of density to them, so you're potentially a very sensitive person, you can tune in, you can feel things, you can know things, you're like, how the heck did they miss that subtle cue? Oh my God, I've been giving you hints all day, and your partner's like, what hints? Is the longer I'm in this, the more I realize how much our beautiful mask partners actually do not know. Where are we learning it? We don't learn relationship in high school, and we don't learn it at university. And we kind of like balk a little bit in our culture at, paying to learn it, because surely you've got to have some serious issues to go to counseling, and that's pretty much the only reason. And then what? All you're left with is what? The blueprint you grew up with. So what I've come to realize is how much we expect that our partners will know, but in actual fact don't at all know. So being able to articulate what your needs are, but from a standpoint of holding yourself and your desires, not lashing out, not, projecting out at all of the ways they're disappointing and the list of all of the ways they haven't met you, and the anger that comes from being unmet and unseen and
also not minimizing, because this is a classic one too. Women all just feel like they're not going to be met, so well, I'm not going to ask for it anyway because he can't meet me, so I'm just going to just push down that voice, that yearning, that need, because I'd rather push it down than feel the pain and anger and frustration of it not being met.
Yeah. Hello, rejection and abandonment wound.
Right. Like I've seen it. If you consider like early childhood, you just 80% of the patterns are laid down by what time you're 5, so everything else just falls into it. So if you have an abandonment wound, your partner is designed to push it and can continue to fade out. But
also, we make stories and meaning out of stuff that might not necessarily even be there.
True, exactly. So it's also we need to be continually curious about why we carry that. How can we keep reacting this way? What are we getting out of the story we continue to tell ourselves? Because that's also the thing, right? Like, we give so much power to our stories too. Like, that's helpful to understand our imprint so we know what we're working with, but don't let it consume you either, because you have so much more power than you know, right?
Yeah. And I actually think our partners are sitting there wanting to be seen as these good, beautiful, lovable humans. But when there's been so many years of you're not good enough, you're disappointing, you don't know how to, I will take this away and not actually reveal to you, I won't turn towards you. When there's been so much of that, under the bridge, it's pretty hard for someone to hang in there that long.
It's just so heartbreaking when I hear you explain that, because that's like, whenever I have, like, my husband and I don't fight a lot, but whenever we have a big argument, it often is him saying, I don't feel appreciated. And I make myself write it down, because I want to know what I'm unconscious of so I can be more conscious of it. And I think we do this as women more than we know, really.
Not appreciate.
Not appreciate what's in front of us. Not
appreciate ourselves, not appreciate the mini milestones, not appreciate what we are getting done in a day. And we will take all of that anger and we make it our partner, and we certainly don't appreciate them.
But even at that point you're talking about in terms of their density, like thinking that they should just get it and cutting them off at the knees for something that they haven't even understood. Like, it would break our hearts to do that to our children, like to continually think our children, should do that, and or are idiots, right? Like, we would hate to continue to do that to our children, and yet how often do we do that in relationship?
Totally.
But purely just not understanding.
Yeah. So, we totally get the I'm tapped out and touched out, but I hope what you get here is a whole lot of ways to start to dismantle that story, because it's just a story. You know, I love those. I wish I could remember where I got it from, but I always loved this. I listened to a podcast at some point, I think, and it was about, or maybe I read a book, can't remember. It was about elite athletes. And essentially they knew that, or the way they were trained was when they were like at their edge, where they were like, I've got nothing left to give. It is all on the dance floor. They knew they still had 20% more.
Wow.
And that has always stuck in my head because I'm always like, capacity is bullshit. Capacity is a construction of your story and your projection based on your ego's decisions, based on your wounds. And capacity is not true because I don't love less from 1 child to 4. And I might sit with 2 children and go, I can't imagine how you do 4. Well, yeah, but until you're there, your capacity grows with you as you grow. Capacity isn't a real thing. So all it is values. So bringing relationship up the value system rather than it's so far down the bottom, it's under gardening.
Yeah.
If it's so far down, you're certainly not reaping rewards from it.
No.
Bringing it front and center, which is like what you were saying. I write it down. I remind myself to appreciate. I spend time in the energy of appreciation because you and I both know in the law of abundance, what you appreciate appreciates. And when you send out to the world more of that, I love that. That's what you get back.
100%.
So there's that. There's the also, are you running from yourself all day? Because there's just so many needs. Well, I wonder if you could be as valuable as your children to yourself.
Yeah.
And in which case, have needs, honor your needs, hold yourself in the day.
And there's going to be resistance in that too. Like your children will need something from you or they'll want you to do something and you'll come up against this identity that you've built about you doing everything or that you need to be that. And that will be the practice of, well, no, you can wait because I'm doing this for myself right now. And that will be, and at every decision that you make to pivot, you're going to hit that old pattern or that old, like, just test from someone outside of you if you really committed to this.
Totes. Yeah. Yeah. And lastly, I would say, what if this was for you? All of the things that you make another thing on you say as another burden on you. You haven't got anything left. You've got to do this. Okay, hang on a minute. What if we just took the burden and the responsibility and the story out and we just asked ourselves, what if this were for me? Well, I want to say that I want these things in the world and I need these things from my man and my relationship and my life. And we get to find this pathway together. So there is a way to always have what you want, but it doesn't look like chucking a tantrum outside of you, castrating and slicing them to 1,000 pieces, or silencing it up and putting it in a dungeon. It doesn't look like any of those things. So tapped out and touched out, yes, some days can be true, but if it is your predominant story, my love, it's a story and you can change it.
And also, yes, 100%. And also self-responsibility around what's continually keeping you there. Like, is it, I don't have any room in my day for any of my needs until 10 p.m. at night. So then I mindlessly watch something to numb out or to have some excitement in my life that leaves me up until midnight and then I'm exhausted the next day. Like, this is also the thing too. Like, if you're continually running on everybody else's needs and you crowd out your own, then you find the pockets late at night. But is that actually nourishing you? Probably not. You're going to feel exhausted. You're going to feel resentful.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would add that too.
So we really hope that you got something out of this podcast. We realize that it might come with a little bit of a sting, but please know it also comes from a total place of love and lived experience, as well as what we both see in our coaching spaces. So please know you're not alone. there is a pathway out, and you do get to design the life that you want to lead.
And I think too, sometimes it can help to have a why big enough to carry you across. Like, as I said, with my story, my why for working on my relationship was really that I wanted my relationship to thrive with 3 children, and I wanted my family life to be one where everyone feels good and valued, but that meant that I had to make a conscious effort to put my relationship higher on my values. And so sometimes that looked like getting my little baby to sleep when she was 3 or 4 months old, and then moving into intimacy with my husband and prioritizing that even when I'm tired, because I know what that gives us each and what that gives the relationship. Versus just putting that on the back burner until one day when my baby might sleep through, or, whatever other excuse that we can come up with when we have, little children. Yeah.
Totally. Choose the bigger why, definitely.
Yeah.
So if you are ready for some big relationship change, you are fully invited to come and join me for 5 weeks in Queen School, beginning on the Day of Lovers, Valentine's Day, February 14. So it's 5 weeks with me. It's a self-paced course content and a live container with coaching calls. And we really dismantle what's blocking and in the way of your femme. Then we look at what is really going on with those masc beings and how we bring more appreciation, understand them, and communicate in a way that is actually received. And then we look at all the nitty-gritty on how relationship is unfolding and cause and effect of what we're initiating and the results we're getting, and how we might do that in a far more magnetic way.
I can't emphasize enough the value of Queen School. Like when I did that, well, I think it must have been your first or second round of it when Pearl was a baby, and just what that gave me for my why, right? Like what that gave me to actually practically shift out of patterns that I was in was just gold, and stuff that I still refine and work out like day to day now. And so I would say to anyone who's thinking about putting their relationship really front and center, to see all the ways in which your relationship is also going to serve your parenting and serve your family, and an investment in your relationship is an investment in your mothering and raising your children, because it's life-giving, right?
How much harder is everything when that's not functional? Thank you. Also, I really appreciate that. My heart was like, God, that's beautiful. So thank you.
You're welcome.
What have you got going on in the world, Bridgie?
Reimagining motherhood. I'm really actually I'm absolutely adoring working with an intimate group of women at the moment in the mentorship that I've just launched. So I'm like really deep in that at the moment. But also the Reimagining Motherhood membership is a thriving group of beautiful women, and we are still working through transitions at the moment. So supporting people who are sending their little ones off to school or kinder or daycare, and then we're going to be moving into supporting your home to hold you and your family with the beautiful Tara, again, with our Liberate focus. So that's going to be happening in March. So yeah, just lots of beautiful stuff unfolding.
So gorgeous. And we find out about that at
𝘮𝘢𝘯𝘵.life.
Beautiful.
Remember to nourish the woman to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
Thank you so much for listening. We literally couldn't do this without you. Please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively into your life, then head on over to 𝘮𝘢𝘯𝘵.life or 𝘮𝘦𝘴𝘵.love to go deeper.
And if you feel like giving back a little to this free content, please rate us on iTunes or Facebook, all of which helps the podcast reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul.
This has been a production of 𝘮𝑤ellnesscouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on facebook.com/𝘮𝑤ellnesscouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.